Sam knew that a submarine was waiting for him as he entered the meeting. The Argonaut, a mouldy vessel that had taken him to the brink of Atlantis, would be there. As Sam sought an exit, the crew were frozen in escape. As Sam watched the clock, the captain ignored squid warnings silently. And so at lunch, Sam would take out his book and end their wait.
A squid? Where? You're the colonel from his bathtub.
Amazon. Bring a book to life.
The weather. Tomorrow, expect a biting cold front. How naughty. I wonder what I'll be wearing or taking off. The night will be wild and untamed. Expect heavy, lashing rain that'll soak you to the skin. By Monday, temperatures will rise, slowly but surely, reaching their peak in the afternoon. Not in the mood for miserable weather? Fly cheaply to Turkey with Sun Express. Sun Express. Non-stop sunshine.
Hello and welcome to the Game Football Podcast from The Times. This is part 3 of our club-by-club Premier League season previews. On today's show, we'll discuss and analyse both Manchester clubs, as well as Aston Villa, Nottingham Forest and Wolves. I'm Tom Clarke, and joining me today we have the former footballer-turned-journalist Gregor Robertson and the football reporter who helpfully covers both Manchester clubs, Aston Villa, Nottingham Forest and Wolves. It's Charlotte Duncker. Hello, Charlotte.
Hi, you all right?
Yeah, good, thank you. Just back from the tour, back and acclimatised, back from America. Delighted to be back in Manchester.
Yeah, delighted. Not feeling too jet-lagged, so touch wood, I've hopefully got over that. So, yeah, back. It was a good tour, actually, to be fair. I think the main words was calm from it, which is not something we've associated with Manchester United in the past few years. So it's going to be interesting to see how that goes on.
Yeah, all with modern sports journalism or football reporting. Yeah. all these podcasts generally. So Gregor, you're enjoying the shows. I did spot a very good. I always like to hear from listeners, and sometimes they're not happy with what we say. Sometimes they enjoy it. But someone pointed out in the comments below one of the articles, there's absolutely mad order to this. And I guess I probably should have explained that the reason for the order of clubs is because of the journalists that we've had on, as explained with Charlotte. But someone clearly wanting a bit more of an alphabetical order type run, but we're just keeping them on their toes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, good to have people who actually know what they're talking about. Covering their patch.
Rather than me and you just chatting nonsense.
Yeah,
exactly.
It helps if you can tick 5 clubs off in one podcast with someone who just covers half the country in one go, I guess.
There's Charlotte's pitch. Charlotte's pitch for a pay rise. Everybody there, just a little. If I had my way, you'd all get more money, but it's not my job. Let's get stuck into it then. And there's only one place to start. We're recording this on Friday morning. And with that in mind, we have to begin with Manchester United. We're going to follow the same format, listeners. I'm just going to run through their ins and outs of the transfer window so far. Diego Leon has joined, as has Enzo Kanye-Biik. But the two big ones already through the door, Mateus Cunha and Brian Bumo. Out have gone Victor Lindelof, Christian Eriksen and Johnny Evans. Kanye-Biik has gone out on loan, as has Daniel Gore, and Marcus Rashford has as well. Charlotte, the big name missing from that list, obviously, technically I'm reading out the definite transfers, but there's a big name missing from that list, isn't there? What else can we expect from Manchester United in the window?
Yeah, Sesko is the one that we expect imminently. He should be having a medical in due course after they agreed a fee. It's around 66.5 million upfront. Well, not upfront, that's the first one, and then with add-ons after it. So they are getting a number 9. So we expect him to be the next signing through the door. I think it's interesting because that takes their spend to over 200 million. And I think if we went back to the start of the summer when we were discussing how much money Manchester United had to spend and how active we thought they were going to be, everyone we spoke to was saying they were going to have to be cautious, PSR this, financial fair play, keep within the budgets. And they've gone and already spent over 200 million. So they really need to be a focus now on trying to get money back. So get some players out. Obviously, Chelsea are interested in Garnacho. That looks like maybe that could happen. Malacia should go. Anthony, Sancho. They've got Marcus Rashford's wages off the book. So there are ways they are looking at saving money. They generated 15 million from add-on sales. So the likes of Elanga going to Newcastle, they got some money from that. So that's where they're at in terms of incomes at the minute. The word is, they're not saying they're fully done, but the players that's currently being linked with after Sesko are going to cost a lot of money. So it would surprise me if they went out and bought even more players in.
They talked, and Amorim and a few of the club hierarchy talked about, once Marcus Rashford left, we don't need to get rid of the rest of the so-called bomb squad, some of those players that you list there, Anthony, Garnacho and things. Does this Sesko transfer change that? Are they now in a position where they've spent a bit of money that they're banking on getting from player sales?
No, from being in America and speaking to people associated with the club, the word was that they don't need to sell to bring a number 9 in. So like Rasmus Højlund, for example, he came out in the mix zone and said he wanted to speak to journalists, which never normally happens unless they've got a point to prove or something to say. He clearly has something to say, and that was that he wants to fight for his place. So they are open to offers for him, but the word from inside the club is they don't have to sell him. And the same with those 4 players that you mentioned in the bomb squad. They don't have to sell them, but obviously it would be really helpful if they did, mainly to add more profit, but also because you've got 4 players there. I know Amorim came out in his first presser in America and said he would welcome them back if they were still here on September the 1st. It's not really an ideal situation when you've got 4 players there who've supposedly said they want to leave and have been training on their own all summer and haven't been integrated into the group. There's a reason why they've been separated. So in an ideal world, yes, all 4 of them would leave, whether the best thing's going to be on loan, whether it's a sale. In the ideal world, it would be a sale and Man United to generate as much money as possible. But we know it's going to be difficult to get the money that they want, given all the buying clubs know that Manchester United want/need to sell them.
Absolutely fascinating. We'll come back to those potential sales in a minute. And you mentioned being on their pre-season tour. I want to ask you a lot about that, Charlotte. But Gregor, this is a hell of a statement from Manchester United. They ended that season with us talking about they just can't seem to score goals. They've gone out and spent £200 million on 3 forward players. Whatever we make of Manchester United's transfer dealings and, the chaos that has surrounded the club off the pitch, this is a big club making a big statement this summer, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it was much needed, as he pointed to their 44 goals in 38 league games last season. That was, I think the worst in about 50 odd years for the club. So that was the obvious starting point. And they've got, in Mbeumo and Cunha, they've got 2 players we know can cut it in the Premier League. And in Sesko, you have someone who's 22, who is a bit raw but is powerful, leads the line, has been coveted for a few years now by some of the biggest clubs in Europe. He's actually quite experienced too. He's looking like he's played 250 games for club and country. He's played in the Champions League. He's always fit. It always seems that he's fit and available. Real athlete. So someone who will lead the line, and that's a positive move as well. I just I'm keen to speak to Charlotte about what's next, because everyone's talking about the next thing is they need a midfielder who can get around the pitch a bit more, because that's a kind of fairly glaring hole. I'm still not entirely sure about wing backs. I've heard that Dorgu's had a pretty promising pre-season, and I'm not entirely convinced at the back either. We said this at the end of last season. There's a lot to do at Manchester United. Yes, this was obviously the first area to tackle, and they've done it, and I think they've done it pretty impressively. But it will be interesting to see how much more business they can do, because they need to do it, in my view.
Charlotte, Gregor's still worried despite 200 million. I think you hinted at it there.
Saying.
But do you agree with some of his worries? But do you think United fans might get a few of those players Gregor's talking about, or might this be it?
I can totally understand. I think if you watch them, last season, even on pre-season, the last game against the first 2 games, they actually played really well. And you thought, is the tactics finally working? Is things starting to slot into place? And then the game against Everton, the sort of old habits crept back in. Defensively, they didn't look as strong. But to me, I think they're screaming out for a number 6. I just think they need someone who can carry the ball. They need some legs in midfield. They just need some pace. I know every team could do with a Rodri, but if they had that profile of player within the team, I really think it would elevate them. They've brought goals in terms of, we know that Cunha can score goals, we know that Mbeumo can score goals. I'm not saying that a number 9 wasn't key, it definitely was. But I think just as important is bringing in a more defensive midfielder who can change the way that they play. With the wing backs, I think Dorgu did look all right on tour. Obviously, it is only pre-season tour, and everything you have to say is caveated by that. But I just think they're in a position where they would want to strengthen everywhere all over the pitch. If you look at the goalkeeper, in an ideal world, would they want an upgrade on Andrea Nana? Probably, but have you got the budget to go out and then buy a new goalkeeper, buy new wing backs, buy a new centre back, buy a new defensive midfielder, and spend 200 million reinforcing your attack? I think they've looked at the biggest problem last season, which was the fact that they just did not score enough goals, and they're looking to resolve that. And then they're going to look at the other pieces of the puzzle, and it just comes down to how much, like, Baliba's been mentioned, but then so has 90 million for him. Are they going to go out and spend 90 million on a fourth player and take their spending to nearly 300 million? To me, that seems unlikely. Obviously, nothing is being ruled out, and the transfer window is crazy, and we've still got over 3 weeks of it left. So anything could happen, but it just seems to be spending that level of money seems excessive when everything going into the window was, we've got money to spend, but we do have to be cautious as to how we do it.
Really interesting. I want to hear more about the Manchester United tour. Tell us a little bit more. You mentioned calm as a word, as a catchphrase, which, as you say, not often associated with Manchester United. And you wrote a brilliant piece on the Times website detailing some of the findings from that tour. Tell us a little bit more about it, but mainly about this idea that Manchester United, for once, were calm.
Yeah, so we actually had a sit down with Ruben Amorim and spoke to him about things that had changed. And he's instilled some rules, but not the sort of rules where it's like, you must be at breakfast for 7:30. He said he doesn't want to treat his players like babies. And I think the main part of it was, before they went on preseason tour, he sat them all down and said, you're my squad that I want for this season. You're the players that I want. You're the ones that are going to be involved the most. This is notwithstanding new signings coming in, obviously. And they've all bought into everything that he's got to say. He's started a new leadership group, which has got Bruno Fernandes plus 5 others in it. So they're all supposed to be holding the other players to account. Amorim basically wants them to hold each other
accountable
for their actions, rather than him having to get involved, like teacher kind of style.
Who else is in that group, Charlotte?
Now you're testing my memory.
Harry Maguire's in there, isn't he?
Harry Maguire, Mazraoui, Tom Heaton, Delo.
So it is more the kind of senior players. It's not necessarily based on notoriety or things, as you say, with Tom Heaton being in there. It's about characters.
Some of that is about how long, obviously longevity and that sort of stuff, and the experience that they've got. But then Mazraoui's not been there that long, and Amorim did bring him up when he was talking about it. He said he likes him as a character, and that's why he's included him within the group. So they've got this 6-strong group, and the whole atmosphere just felt different. Like, they weren't doing double sessions, they were only doing one. And then in the afternoon where they were staying, there was like it was a really fancy street with loads of designer shops. So you'd see them like pottering around the street together. They organised a team meal. Didn't have to. I think in the past there'd been like little cliques. So on days off or afternoons off, you'd have players. They'd all still do stuff together, but they'd do stuff together in smaller groups, whereas they were choosing to do stuff together as a whole squad. We spoke to Luke Shaw. He said it's the best camp that he's been on. He's been at the club for 11 years. So for him to say that is quite telling. And it just, every single person he spoke to from the club, I know they realise they're talking to journalists and they want a certain message putting out there, but they were all saying the same thing, in that it was very calm. Everyone was having a great time. I think it helped they were in one place for a really long time as well. Their base was Chicago. They flew out to New Jersey for one game, but that was just like doing an away game, and then they stopped in Atlanta on the way home. Whereas previously, like, Mourinho's complained about it, Van Gaal wasn't happy about it, Christian Eriksen I think complained about it last summer, and the fact that they had to move around so often that it just really disrupted what they were trying to do. So they had this main base, everyone felt chilled out, everyone was buying into it, enjoying their time there, and yeah, I think to be honest, it felt really positive as well.
I think he was it was a really interesting interview, and you're sort of reminded that, like, the sort of charisma he has. And, when we first arrived, that was a thing that was immediately kind of smacked you in the face. And then obviously the football was kind of quickly went even further downhill, and everyone was like, who is this guy? He's not, a lot of people were thinking, is he cut out for this? I don't think it would be much for that kind of profile. It would take much for that kind of profile, his profile, to change again, because, he is very, 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 very persuasive, and in these interviews, and he's asked about. I think he's very open as well. He's saying things like it wasn't just I think he was obviously asked a question about how he felt after defeat, and he kind of flipped the question and said, "No, I actually went into games fearing defeat." You know, that's quite a remarkable thing for a manager of Manchester United to say. Like, I was going into games knowing that we were going to lose, basically, and even like, and he was asked about the pressure and stuff, and he's saying, "No, remembers pressure being when his career ended at 32, and he sat down with a spreadsheet with his wife to kind of plan out how much money they've got and what he had to do." And, you know, he has got charisma. He's very good in that side of the game, and I don't think it would take much for his kind of profile to change again, sort of this season, if Manchester United just show a bit of improvement and a bit more sort of evidence of understanding his system, because the system has always been the big thing that has been a stick to beat him with as well. We have to see, no matter what business they do, evidence of the system working, progress, and like the players know what they're doing.
Yeah, and in those first 2 games on tour, it seemed that was happening. Like Iraola even said after they beat Bournemouth, he said they're one hell of a team. You would never have said that about Manchester United last year. But on the pitch, he's literally walked them through the tactics. So 2 days before the game, they'd have all like the mannequins set out and he'd be walking them through what he expected from them. Then they'd do the same the next day and they'd just speed it up. And then the day after in the game, you'd see exactly what it was that they'd been working on. And they're able to take that into games, which obviously last season, we weren't seeing any of that. We weren't seeing evidence that they were practicing anything on the training pitch or being able to take it into the games. To be fair, they didn't have as much time to practice what he wanted, and he was trying to change the whole system midway through a campaign, which made it quite difficult. But I think I think it was Delot told us he only wants them to do 2 to 3 things a game, so he's not trying to overload them with information. So I think the hope is that if he gets these basic things into them now, that throughout the season they'll be able to pick up different things as well that he wants. And the biggest thing I can say about them in that after those first 2 games is that they played like a team. They knew where each other were or were supposed to be. They were connecting. They were playing a lot quicker. They were pressing like they should. The forwards looked like they had some description of relationship, especially that Everton game wasn't great, but Cunha and Mbeumo and Bruno Fernandes seemed to be clicking together quite well, and that was the first time that they'd played together in a game. So there were lots of positives to take, but they're all from that Everton game. Bruno Fernandes came out and called the parts of the performance lazy. Just a reminder that it's obviously not all perfect, and there still is a long way to go.
You've both teased it, but this is the big question then. What is this season for Manchester United? What could we expect? I mean, I think listening to you and looking at it with the no European football, I think there's a good chance of a positive season for Manchester United. What positive is, I'm not quite sure. Whether they need to qualify for Europe, whether they need to get up into that top 6. But it feels like at least Ruben Amorim has got the foundations in place for what he wants to deliver, listening to you, Charlotte. What is a good season for Manchester United? Is it about, well, as I say, positivity? Is it about vibes and, the camp and the squad and the club being more together? Or is there a reality check here where actually this is all nice and I'm glad you're all having meals together, but you need to get Champions League football?
I think Champions League might be a step too far as an aspiration when you look at what the other teams have done and how they've strengthened and how far behind the Manchester United were. I think if you look at how bad last season was, any Europe is the aim. Obviously, Europa League would be better than Conference League for them. But yeah, the positive vibes won't stand for anything. They won't mean anything if they can't translate that into better performances on the pitch and pushing up the table. And Amorim is going to be under pressure to deliver those results, and really quickly. They've got a difficult start as well. They play Arsenal, City and Chelsea in the first 6 games. So it's not going to be easy, but given how bad last season was, if he gets off to a bad start again and there's no indication that there's been any progress or anything like that, especially with all this money that's been spent as well, the pressure's going to be on him. But yeah, I think European football is the minimum aim for them this season, and then I suppose they hope they go on a cup run as well.
Gregor, do you see that happening? Could you see a top 7, top 8 finish for this Manchester United team?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, anything lower than that has got to be a disappointment. I think they should be, aiming for the top 6. I think not having European football is a big thing, particularly when Newcastle and Villa do. Charlotte's right as well. I mean, everyone, the amount of money being spent in the summer is pretty eye-watering. Liverpool spent 270 million, Arsenal 200, City 150, as well as on top of January, Chelsea 250. There's still time to go in the window, and Man U were starting at a far lower base. So, it's still going to be an uphill battle, but I think they have to be aiming for the top 6.
Very interesting, Manchester United fans. If you've got views on what this season might hold for your club, get in touch with me, tom.clarke@thetimes.co.uk. Let's move across the city to Manchester City then. Another club, as you say, Gregor, spending a lot of money, but doing so very early in the window with obviously that Club World Cup competition in mind. Tijani Renders, Ryan Aït-Nouri, Marcus Bettinelli, Ryan Cherki, Sven Nijpan and James Trafford in. Jan Kuto, Kevin De Bruyne, Scott Carson, Juma Ba has gone out on loan, Kyle Walker and Maximo Perrone. Charlotte, as I say there, a lot of their business being done very, very early. James Trafford, the most recent signings. Do we think there'll be any more business for City in terms of players leaving or players coming in?
I think players leaving, yes. You've obviously, the big one at the minute is Jack Grealish. Where's he going to end up? Everton's obviously a possibility. It's not guaranteed that he'll end up there because I doubt that they're going to be able to afford his wages, so maybe that's one that's going to drag on till later in the window to see who else comes in for him and what the other viable options are. But it's clear that he needs to go and play his football somewhere else, especially if he has aspirations, which he does, to get in the England squad for the World Cup. Then you've got midfielders like James Bakati. There's interest there from Nottingham Forest. I think we all expect him to go. So there's a few that we expect to leave. In terms of incomings, I remember after that spending spree at the start of the summer, I was like, surely you're done now. And it wasn't a no. I think ideally they want to bring in a right back. Livramento's someone that they've liked for a long time, but whether that's possible or not, it doesn't seem to be at the minute. But if you look at the money that they spent and the players, the profile of the players that they brought in January, and then the players that they brought in this summer, I don't think it would be a disaster if we don't see any more incomings at Manchester City before the window closes. They've done quite well good for themselves.
Yeah, they've done some very good business and very interesting business. City are a fascinating one for me. I can't quite decide. I feel like it could be a season of two different extremes. Either they're back to winning ways, Pep Guardiola does Pep Manchester City 2.0 or 3.0, I'm not sure which version we're on now, and actually challenges for the title. Or there's part of me that thinks it's just not there yet, that actually this rebuild is a bit bigger. The players they brought in will need more time, and that maybe, just maybe, this might be even the last season we see of Pep Guardiola at Manchester City. Gregor, I'm going to come to you first because this is a theme we've discussed throughout last season, and it's one that you changed your mind on. Where are you at on Manchester City and Pep Guardiola heading into this season at the moment?
I share that conflict, Tom. I've they read Pep Guardiola gave an interview in GQ recently, and just how exhausted he sounded, and it was kind of really striking. And it was evident last season too. He just kind of pan out for a minute. He's been a manager for 17 years. It'll be a decade next year at City. Like, there's not many managers stay right at the top of the game for usually more than kind of a decade at most. And he's approaching 2 decades, and it will happen. Although he's the greatest manager of all time, really, or certainly one of them, there will come a point in time where his powers will wane, and it's not always easy to pinpoint why that is. Sometimes it's about sort of evolution of tactics, more broadly. Sometimes it's just, he's spoken about how whether you can have the same impact on a group of players. All these things are going to be fascinating to watch this season because. I'm with you. It wouldn't be that surprising if City and Guardiola are back and challenge for the title, possibly win it. It wouldn't be a huge shock. But my gut tells me that I'm not sure he sees out the full 2 years of the contract. That's just my gut instinct, and it's going to be fascinating to watch because you kind of look at the recruitment they've done, and it all looks great on paper, and it all, there's some players that we know really well, and others like Cherki who are really exciting. Marmoush was the hit from January, the others not so much. You just realise that you do have to have a lot of hits out of this expenditure for City to really be back challenging for the title, because Liverpool have been such a force last season, and they've gone again. And Chelsea the same. So, like, I'm not entirely convinced that the recruitment they've done, it's all going to happen overnight. It's got there's so many players who are coming to a new league as well. Fascinating to watch.
Yeah,
I think it's not just a recruitment though, is it? I think one of the main points is going to be having Rodri back. I think that was obviously made such a difference to them last season. So bring him back in, a fully fit Rodri. I'm not saying he can win them the title single-handedly, but he is that good that he changes the whole dynamic of how that team play. So once you've got him back in with these new signings around him as well, it's going to take them time to bed in, isn't it? And it's like when Haaland first got there and they were thinking, oh, how do we now service this guy who can score all these goals after we've been playing so long with a false nine or without a proper striker? So there are going to be times of adaptation, but I just think they are still at such a good level, aren't they? Even the last season was really bad for them in their terms. They finished third and they finished the season 10 games unbeaten. Like, that's not too bad, is it? If they can bring their best player back in and have some new additions, I think they'll push the others a lot closer this season.
So you're in City are back camp, Charlotte, for want of you're more nuanced than that. But you're more in the camp.
I mean, given we write in headlines, I'm not going to say that. You might put that on the top of the podcast.
Never.
And it'll come back to haunt me.
Me and Neil would never do a thing like that. That is an outrageous accusation. But you are more in the camp that we might see one more final fling from Pep Guardiola, and that it might be pretty successful.
I just think it's Guardiola. You can never, ever write him off. And yeah, he sounded tired, but I think the fact the last season would have hurt. It was, for them, it was embarrassing. For him, it was embarrassing, the levels that they dropped to, which, like I said, third, saying they've dropped levels is ridiculous. But I think he has still got something in him. And maybe Gregor's right. Maybe he doesn't see out 2 years there. That could depend on if they win this season. If he turns his team around and they win big again this season, maybe that's when he walks away and he's like, do you know what, I've done it now. That I've mission completed. I feel like I can walk away. I don't think he would walk away with a team in transition. I think he feels like he needs to get them back to that winning point again. And the squad that they've got, the players that they've got, the quality they've got, the manager that they've got, there is no reason to think that he's not capable of doing that.
Very interesting. We'll see what happens with Manchester City and United. Charlotte, Duncker and Paul Hurst will be keeping you up to date on their Times website. Gregor mentioned Liverpool and Chelsea there. They are two of the 11 clubs that we have already previewed in this series. If you're just coming to this podcast, just go back in your feed to find those two previous shows. And next week, we've got Gregor and Martin Hardy discussing Newcastle, Sunderland, Leeds and Burnley. But there's loads more still to come in this show. After the break, we'll be discussing Aston Villa, Nottingham Forest and Wolves. We'll see you in a sec.
I need to tell you about the races today.
I've just left the girls. We had such a nice day.
We all wore something pink.
Sue made us all wear pink.
Josie pulled out all the stops for the picnic.
My sausage rolls went down a storm.
And I spotted a jockey wearing pink in the parade ring, so we had to back him.
Sue picked the winner in the big race.
We got a bottle with the winnings.
Next thing you know, she's got us all on the dance floor.
I've still got the moves.
Her dancing was hilarious.
We've already booked to come again.
Watch out for the ladies in pink.
4 million memories made every year. The going is good. Great British Racing. Search horse racing near me.
Join us for tips, tricks and all those magical, beautiful baby experiences on Parenting Heaven. It's just so wonderful.
Oh, really? This is why I bank with Monzo. For every explosive nappy change, I stick a £1 in my spa day pot. At this rate, I'll hit my goal by the weekend.
Monzo. Budget for the things you really need. UK residents, T's and C's apply.
Welcome back to the Game of Football podcast from The Times. These are our Premier League club-by-club season preview shows. This is part 3, and we're about to dive in to talk about Nottingham Forest, Wolves and Aston Villa. I'm Tom Clarke, and I'm joined by Gregor, Robertson and Charlotte Duncker. Charlotte, we're going to start with Forest, one of the stories of last season, of course. Just run you through their summer business so far. Jar Cunha, Igor Jesus, Dan Ndoye and Angus Gunn are for the 4 signings in. Out, we've got Anthony Elanga, Jonathan Panzo, Harry Toffolo, Ramon Souza, Taylor Binden has gone out on loan, Wayne Hennessy has been released, Danilo, Lewis O'Brien and Matt Turner. One of the names not mentioned there is Morgan Gibbs-White, staying at the club, signing a new contract after interest from Tottenham. Obviously, that was a huge bit of business for Forest. Not huge signings been brought in there, unless you can tell me some of those players they're particularly excited by. Obviously got Conference League football at the moment, or is it Europa League football as we record? Who knows where that Crystal Palace court case will go. What can we expect from Forest in the coming weeks when it comes to signings in and signings out?
I think we can expect more signings for sure, because they definitely haven't done enough. Angus Gunn's coming as a backup goalkeeper, so not to discredit him, but if we take him out of the equation, they've then signed 3 players. So they've got a right winger, a centre forward and a centre back. There is some excitement around the 2 Botafogo players. So there's, in terms of Igor Jesus and Jar Cunha and how they're going to fit in, I think there's lots of potential there. But the main thing is that they need more experienced players through the door as well. If you look last season, Nuno, I think he had used the smallest amount of players. I think he only used 23 players. And they're going into European competition, whichever competition it is, they're going to need to be able to rotate. They're going to have a bigger squad. So I think I've been told they're looking around at least 5 more players coming in.
Wow.
Another winger, some fullbacks, central midfielder. So yeah, out of all the teams that I cover, I am expecting them to be the busiest before the window closes, because they need, well, as much as anything, they need bodies. But I think when you look at the players that they've brought in and the fact this is the first time they're in Europe for 30 years, they also need some experience as well, because at the minute their squad hasn't got that. So Traore is one, obviously, Nuno's worked with in the past. He's been linked with a move to Forest this summer. There's a few other players like McAtee.
Is that Adama Traore from Fulham?
Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry, yeah. And then McAtee from Manchester City is someone that they've been speaking to City about. So there are conversations ongoing on players that they are interested in, but they're just going to need to get them over the line before the deadline, because they definitely need more signings.
Gregor, would you agree with that? Your former club, obviously a huge season ahead for them. You agree with Charlotte's assessment there about the number of players and the quality that needs to still come in?
Yeah, I mean, the one thing to say is that Nuno kind of doesn't want a huge squad. He never has. And even when Wolves made it to Europa League quarter final, I think it was, it was the same story. He kind of didn't do huge rotations. He, a lot of focus on sort of rest and recovery and that kind of thing. So I think Forest really, they need to try and improve the starting 11. And a lot of players have been brought in the last couple of years who haven't done that. I think that's the sort of diplomatic way to say it. Been a lot of waste, and they have improved in terms of a bit more kind of focused recruitment. There are areas of the pitch they need to strengthen. They need a left back. I mean, Nico Williams was brilliant there last season, but he's right-footed and he's, I think they definitely need someone there. They brought in Moreno from Villa, and he didn't really, play regularly on loans. That was last season. So they definitely need a left back. And I think, as I say, I think it's about probably another wide player. And Ndoye is a good signing. I've always been impressed with him when he's playing for Switzerland. Quick, very direct. But I think it's about trying to push and challenge. You looked at Forest's team last season, you could name it. You could name the 11, possibly with a change in midfield, maybe Ryan Yates or like Sangari, or, there was slightly different makeup in midfield, but you could name the starting 11. I think they need to be pushed. I think, when Hudson-Odoi was out, or when Wood was out, or when Elanga was out, or when Gibbs-White was out, the team suffered. So they need to push and improve the starting 11. And that's what Marinakis is going to do. He's hugely ambitious. It's an enormous boost to keep hold of Gibbs-White. Amid the interest from Spurs. So that was hugely important, because he's the fulcrum of the team. He's the guy who connects defence and attack. But for me, I think it's about trying to push the starting 11, because the last season was like they overperformed. I think they trying to really push those players and not make them complacent, not let them be complacent about having a place in the starting 11 is the most important thing.
You're talking about quality there and depth from both of you then. Should this, double header with Europe, having to contend with that, and a desire to presumably hit the same heights in the league, that's going to be a real challenge, isn't it, Charlotte? Is there a worry for Forest fans that we're at this stage and we're talking about need for quality, for depth, and they've got an extra competition to compete in?
I don't think it's a worry. I think there just needs to be a management of expectations. I think, if you take Aston Villa, for example, when Unai Emery went in there, they were favourites to get relegated and he took them to Europe, and then your expectations rise, and then why shouldn't they? You think, right, well, we need to be competing in Europe every season. We should be going, if they're in the Conference League, they should be thinking they can go and win it. And the fan expectation then rises regardless of how many players they've brought into the squad. So it's about tempering that expectation, because then last season, Villa finishing 6th, missing out on Champions League, it's disappointing. But then if you look at it in the grand scheme of things, as to where they've come from in the last few years and where they're at, was that really a terrible season for them? If you think of all the Champions League nights they had as well, probably not. So I think Forest can look at, I'm not saying they should learn from Aston Villa, but I think one season of being really good, the expectations rise so much. I think if they can be consistent in the league again and enjoy a good run in Europe, I think that would be a good season for them and their fans. Because if we go back to the start of last season, if we probably played back these podcasts, we were probably talking about them being in the mix for getting relegated.
That's exactly what we did.
We don't talk about that.
That's exactly what we did, Charlotte. We did an entire predicted Premier League table, and we had them 17th. And that was even with having a former Nottingham Forest player on the show. We still put them in 17th. I mean, I've got to say, I'm not suggesting they'll finish 17th this season. I'm not doubling down, but I'm not listening to you both and thinking about the challenges ahead. And, you mentioned clubs like Aston Villa, and Newcastle is another club that we've talked about the challenges of suddenly having European football. I don't see this Forest squad as strong as either of those two squads when it came to those challenges. I don't know whether you said there, Charlotte, if they could, have a cup run, enjoy themselves in Europe and maybe kind of get in the top half of the table. I think we could be talking bottom half of the table for Nottingham Forest here. Am I wrong, Gregor?
I mean,
say yes.
I think that's entirely possible. I think that. I mean, the preseason games have been interesting. It's also worth pointing out they've scored 1 goal in 6 games.
Yeah, I was going to say they really struggled. Yeah,
0-0 with Monaco, lost 3-1 to Fulham, 0-0 with Estoril. Lost 1-0 to Birmingham, 0-0 with Fiorentina. Not many goals there. Jesus, Igor Jesus is exciting. He obviously was someone who made a big impact in the Club World Cup, and it was possible that possibly Forest were going to be gazumped there, but he's made the move to Forest. That's an exciting signing, but it is so hard to not only get into the European spots and then compete on both fronts, but then to maintain that league form is so hard. It's so hard.
But you mentioned goals there as well. I mean, is Chris Wood not the slight embodiment of what we're talking about here? An amazing season last season, but 33. I don't see the Chris Wood trick happening again. I'm not sticking him straight in my fantasy football team going, Chris Wood's going to be banging in the goals again.
He overperformed, didn't he?
Absolutely. It was amazing. And I'm not, this is not me digging out Nottingham Forest last season. It was an incredible achievement as much as they fell away at the end. I'm just saying, I'm worried this season. I think, and I don't think there's anything wrong with it, but they could be looking at 14th and maybe, the Europa League or the Conference League, whichever it is, a bit of a run, some great nights at the City Ground, but that might be as good as it gets for Nottingham Forest.
I think the positive thing you could look at is the experience of Nuno. Like Gregor mentioned, he's been here with Wolves before and they weren't dragged into a relegation battle. So, I mean, the players might not have the experience, but the manager does, and he knows how to get the best out. Two of the best bits of business they've done this season haven't been, in this closed season, haven't been bringing players in. It was getting Nuno to sign a new deal and also somehow persuading Gibbs White to sign that new contract as well. So I think both of those, as in Nuno and Gibbs White, are going to be the key for them. And I don't think we can write them off as a one-hit wonder, because they've got time to work on stuff and they are going to bring in new faces as well. But I think the recruitment of these next batch of players that they decide to get in the next few weeks could be the key to that.
No way we should write them off. There's no way
I'm doubling down, 17th again. I'm doing it. I'm doing it.
No, I don't. I mean,
No, me and Gregor aren't writing them off. We'll come back to you, Tom, at the end of the season and remind you of these comments.
If they keep hold of the two centre halves and the goalkeeper, that's a brilliant little trident as a foundation. All I know was one of the best fullbacks in the league last season. All these people, we have question marks about them maintaining these levels. Like Elliot Anderson was an outstanding signing. I don't have any doubts about Gibbs White. I think Callum Hudson-Odoi has found a home if he can stay fit. Like, great player at the top end of the Premier League, like challenging at the top end of the Premier League. Elanga's a big loss. Like, that's why I say bringing another winger maybe as well as Ndoi. And Jesus, they need him to be successful. They need whoever it is, the way they play, whoever it is leading the line, they need them to be clinical. And Woods was like ridiculously clinical for the first 2/3 of the season. So, like, I have no reason to say that they're going to fall off completely, but they're facing enormous new challenges this season, and that's very clear.
Do you both think they will be in the top half? Because I'm thinking like 12th, and they'd be glad of it.
I think top half. Top
half. Gregor's going top half. Charlotte?
I think top half.
You wavered though. I could tell when I said 12th, you were like, 12th sounds good.
I was thinking 10th.
Okay,
so
fine.
That's top half.
Top half it is. Nottingham Forest fans, get in touch. Tell me how wrong I am. Tom at tom.clarke@thetimes.co.uk. We're talking about Nuno Espirito Santo. We've talked about Wolves. Let's talk about them now. I said there'd be some ropey links on these club-by-club previews, and so it has proved. Charlotte, I'll run through some of the ins and outs. Fer Lopez has come in. John Arias and David Moller-Wolf have come in as well. Jorgen Strand-Larsen's permanent move being completed too. Pablo Sarabia, Mateus Cunha, Craig Dawson, Chem Campbell, Ryan Aït-Nouri, Tommy Doyle, Nisa Giga, Chiquinho, Nelson Semedo, Joy Hodge, Bastian Mayopo, Boubacar Traore and Gonzalo Guedes. A load of those players I didn't even know belonged to Wolves, but they've all left this summer. A strong finish to their season, really, as much as the table perhaps didn't suggest that, Charlotte. Have we got another club here that are hoping for a good summer and a few more signings?
I think they definitely do still need signings. They need someone else who can help contribute with the goals. So another centre forward would help. That would put not only just push Strand-Larsen, but bring more goals into the team. They've lost Cunha and Aït-Nouri, and they contributed, I think it was to 55% of Wolves' Premier League goals last season. So when you lose that out of your team, you've really got to find somewhere else to get it from. They've signed two right wingers in Fer Lopez and John Arias, so it'd be interesting to see how they fit in. But as I understand it, they're looking for another forward and a central midfielder to compete with Andre and João Gomes. But they did some really good business in the January window. Agbadou and Menetzi were really good, and they were key to that run they went on towards the end of the season. So there are foundations from that to build on. I think the concern would be the players that left, and have they been replaced yet, and how does this, obviously Vitor Pereira's first full season in charge, what does that look like? How do they build on the good momentum that they picked up at the back end of last season? I think there's been a few unhappy fans within the fan base at pre-season. They've not had very many good results. I don't think they've won, actually. Not that counts for anything, but some new faces through the door might just change the feeling, and hopefully they've got a difficult first game. They've got Man City at home, but a little baptism of fire to start the season off.
No bad thing to test yourselves, as you say, losing to Girona and Lens in the last two pre-season games. Gregor, what do you make of Wolves going into this season?
Yeah, I think Vitor Pereira's the kind of the main interest for me. It's his 11th. I was looking, his 11th job since 2010, and only Porto, where he spent 2 years, in Shanghai, where he spent 3 years, has he been more than a year at a club. Like, he's done an extremely itinerant career. I'm not quite, he did an outstanding job last season. Outstanding. I think he's got a 48% win record at Wolves, which is brilliant. And his impact was brilliant, and he's got a very clear system, a very clear way of playing. But he has lost a really important player in Cunha, and it's going to be how these new signings land, because John Arias, 27, he's not played outside of South America, Colombian white player. Per Lopez has played 7 La Liga, started 7 La Liga games. Came from Celta Vigo. He's 21. Like, they both look really promising, but are they gonna hit the ground running? Not sure. And the left wing back as well, David Muller-Wolf, from AZ Alkmaar, they're kind of really good track record of producing talented young players, but again, it's a big step up. It's very hard to place them. There's been a bit going on in the background at Wolves as well over the summer. They've appointed Domenico Tetti as director of professional football, and he previously worked with Pereira at Al Shabab, and I think Pereira does seem to be starting to get a bit more influence over recruitment, and that's not always been the case at Wolves. There's always been George Mendes had a big influence. It's not always been the manager's job, but he seems to be getting a bit more influence at the club, and he deserves that.
He's definitely back. Don't worry about that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but yeah, I mean, clearly there's be some link there as well, I think, with Pereira. So, but I just think his second season is going to be really interesting. Our first full season, as Charlotte pointed out there, it was, he came in and made a big impact, and there was a clear goal of survival, and they tailed off a bit towards the end of the season, but they were safe. They were safe early doors, and there were a lot of good vibes, points then pints. It doesn't last. It doesn't last. The reality returns.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, is there not, okay, I'm looking at and listening to you guys, and yes, he did really well, but they've lost their best player in Cunha, probably their second best or most consistent player in Ait Nouri. Certainly everyone stuck him in their fantasy football teams because he was always quite reliable. But I mean, they finished 16th. Gregor, on recent shows, we talked about other clubs that finished higher than 16th, having had difficult summers. Are we not looking at, these teams that have come up, Sunderland and Leeds and Burnley, are thinking, how can we buck the trend? Are they not going to be looking at Wolves and thinking, well, they've lost 2 of their best players, they can be in the conversation for relegation?
Yeah, I mean, if the bottom 3 or the promoted trio last season weren't so bad, Wolves would have been dead and buried really when he came in, and I also look around at the Premier League, look at the Premier League table, and I think if there are any, it's going to be hard again. We've discussed this many times for the promoted trio, but if you're looking around it teams to be drawn in, Wolves are one of them, undoubtedly. So yeah, I'm not as bullish as some people about Pereira's. He had a huge impact, but I think part of that was the circumstance, and when that all, you have a pre-season and a new season begins and everyone's strengthened around you. Wolves have been chronically underinvested in for a number of years, and that's because they had to comply with profit and sustainability regulations. Now they've lost 2 more of their best players, and they have to sign well, they have to recruit well, or they're going to be down there again.
Yeah, I think they're relegation candidates without signing. Charlotte, final word from you on Wolves.
Yeah, I think their fans would love a season where they're not dragged into the relegation conversation, but the way you've laid it out there, it wouldn't surprise me if they're in and around the scrap. I think they're good enough to not get fully dragged down as the bottom of it. One of the main points about Cunha was when he was suspended for all those games last season, they actually played better as a team, I think, because he was such the star man. When he's there, they were obviously, for obvious reasons, looking to pass him the ball all the time, and he was involved in all the play, whereas as a unit and as a team, they actually played a lot better when he wasn't there. So they have proven and shown last season that they can. I think they won 3 and drew 1 when he was suspended. So they've proven that they can pick up results when he's not there. But it's just how do they build on what Pereira did last season and become a better unit? And I do think they still need some new signings. But saying that, I do think that João Gomez, the midfielders are key for them, and I think they went slightly under the radar last season. They played really well, João Gomez and Andre as well. So they have got potential there, but I think just given what's happened in the last few seasons, it wouldn't surprise me if they are in and amongst the relegation chatter, but I think they're good enough to stay up.
New signings needed. And speaking of new signings, let's end with arguably the most fascinating club going into this Premier League season for me, Aston Villa. Charlotte, I'll run through their transfer business or lack of. Yacine Özcan and Marco Bizot are the two players who've come in so far. Some recognised names going out and some players on loan, including Robin Olsen, Courtney House, Philippe Coutinho completing a move to Vasco da Gama, Enzo Barrenetxea out on loan, Philippe Marchal, and then Özcan has gone back out on loan as well. So one of those two players who's come in has then gone back out on loan. This is not what we were expecting from Aston Villa, given the last couple of seasons, nights in the Champions League, brilliant performances, Unai Emery, what a great manager. What's going on?
They have just announced while we've been on this podcast that they've signed Evan Guzand. So they have got someone else through the door, luckily for them.
He's a striker, right?
Yeah. Cost him about 30 million, come from Nice. He was their player of the season last season, so he scored 12 goals in League One. So that's definitely going to help, because at the minute the only centre forward they've got is Ollie Watkins, and clearly there's interest from other Premier League clubs from him, but Villa's very clear on their stance in that he is not for sale. So they do need, when you look at their incomings, obviously it's just a backup goalkeeper at the moment and Gessant, who we've just mentioned. So they do need reinforcements, but I think possibly one of the key things is keeping the group together as well, because there's been interest in Morgan Rogers. He's obviously a really good player. Watkins, John McGinn, we heard there was a bid put in for him from Newcastle yesterday. Youri Tielemans, there's been interested in him. He was their player of the season last season. Will Emi Martinez staying or go? And I think if they can keep the core of their group together, the group that's been so successful over the last couple of seasons, I think that is going to be key for them as well. And so far they're managing to do that. But in terms of what they would want at the beginning of the window, I was told that they wanted a right back / right-sided defender, because Emery likes those versatile defenders that can play anywhere across the back line. Another striker, which they've obviously brought in, and a right-sided attacker, because you still expect someone like Leon Bailey to probably leave the club this summer as well. So they do really need to spend, but they're treading a really fine line when it comes to their finances, especially when it comes to the UEFA rules as well. They've already been fined by UEFA $9.5 million. So I think one big sale would need to come, and that hasn't happened yet.
Who could that be? Could that be Morgan Rogers, do you think? Because that would be a big sale, wouldn't it? Or is Watkins more likely?
To be honest, I was thinking someone more like Emi Martinez. He switched agents at the back end of last season. He had that bizarre moment on the pitch when he was crying on the final home game of the season, and everyone was like, well, why is he crying? Is he leaving? And then you speak to people at the club and they were like, well, there's not been an offer from him from anywhere, so we've got no idea if he's going. And obviously he's still there at the moment, so maybe he's one that could leave. Leon Bailey keeps being linked with a move to Saudi, so that wouldn't be a surprise. And if he goes to Saudi, they could get some money from him. Buendia, I think Buendia's had an all right pre-season, but he's not one of Emery's favourite players. They could get some money for him. But the big players, in terms of the ones they could generate the most cash for, like Rogers, Watkins, they're the players when you speak to people, they're just not for sale, is what they say. Obviously, every player is for sale for a price. If someone came and offered something stupid for Ollie Watkins, like over 100 million, they're not going to turn it down, are they? It's a business. But if you look at the dynamic of that team, they need Watkins. So why it would have to be a really good offer to let him leave, and that's why I understand what their stance is, that he's not for sale. So they need to improve from last season. No top team in the top half scored fewer goals from them, and that defensive solidity that we'd seen in the first 2 seasons under Emery disappeared at times as well. They need to improve with their record away from home. They were really good at Villa Park, but away from home, I think they lost something like 9 times, which if they want to be in the Champions League, which they do, that's something they need to turn around. But then they could have ended up in the Champions League if they didn't have that really poor performance on the final day of the season. And obviously the refereeing decisions didn't help them with that either. So I don't know. They're an interesting one because, like you say, we all expected them to have... We were told there was money. I don't think that anyone didn't think they wouldn't spend. I know they've just spent 30 million on a forward. But I think we thought they would have done more than what they have done.
Gregor, what do you make of that? And try not to talk exclusively about the future of John McGinn. I know he was mentioned in a big part of your life. And
understandable, he's, highly coveted.
Who wouldn't want John McGinn? Absolutely. But am I right to be a little bit inquisitive and worried about Villa this season?
Yeah, I mean, it's the same sort of conversation about how hard it is to break in and sustain it and build. When you're trying to get into the Champions League places, I know they fell just short, like agonisingly short last season. And then it's a different sort of wage to turnover ratio in UEFA. They've got to get down to 70%, and that's a challenge, another challenge to add on top of that. So, I think they've been quite smart. Let's be honest about it. They had some imaginative sales and purchases last summer, getting rid of Douglas Luiz, and then, I wonder whether someone like Jacob Ramsey, like they would be loath to sell him, but it'd be pure profit in accounting terms. They are going to probably have to move people on before they can spend big. They have assembled a really strong squad. I think. I think they made some smart signings last January as well. Daniel Malen coming in. Rashford is only on loan, but I think they've operated quite shrewdly given all the restrictions sort of hovering over them. And I think it could be another one where you go down towards the end of the month, and a few players have moved on, and they might make another signing. It might be if they line someone up to replace Watkins that they allow Watkins to go, because
how on earth are we not lining up a emotional homecoming for Jack Grealish? By the way, like last season they took a player.
The money
would stop it, wouldn't it? Not even a little loan deadline day loan move to Aston Villa.
Possibly, which is why the Everton thing I don't think is going to get done anytime soon, because if we talk hypothetically, if he's on around 300 grand a week, Villa aren't going to pay them those level of wages they need to get the squad cross ratio down anyway. But Everton aren't going to either. So if City are in a position where it gets to the end of the window and they're having to negotiate with clubs to take Grealish on loan and they're going to partially pay his wages, then maybe that is a conversation Villa can get involved in, because why wouldn't they? But then at this moment in time, that's not an option that's on the table. So if you're not going to try and sign a player who's on 300 grand a week when you've just been fined by UEFA for breaching regulations to do the what wage your players are on, and they've really got to reduce their wage bill. They know they've got to do that. So bringing someone in on such an obscene wage just wouldn't make any sense. So I don't think, never say never, but I just think that until I think it's a later on down the window thing when City are having to haggle and negotiate with clubs just to try and get part of his wages paid.
Yeah.
Maybe. But Gregor mentioning Marlon as well is an interesting one, because we haven't really seen much of him, because they bought in Asensio and Rashford, and they were favoured to him really in the last few months of the season. So he should feel like a new signing for them.
I think you pan out. This is a squad that made the Champions League quarter-final, that came within a whisker of making, despite all the challenges we've just spoken about for a number of clubs, of getting into the Champions League in successive seasons. They came so close to it. And I actually think their depth after the additions in January, their depth was brilliant going forward in particular. And a lot of the players we're talking about who aren't going to be guaranteed starters, like Malen, like possibly Buendia if he's fit. Like Ramsey doesn't always seem to manage to hold in. Like Barkley, when you're playing against a bottom half team in the Premier League and you've got to rotate, they're good players to be bringing in. I think they've assembled a really good squad. I think I put them in the same bracket as Forest. They need to be making signings that take them forward onto the next step. That the impact of starting 11, that's what they need. Their focus has to be. But it's tough for them with the kind of spending restrictions they have.
But you look at the table though, and we're talking about Aston Villa and the demands both from the hierarchy and the fans and the expectations. Those great Champions League nights, they want Champions League football. I dare say they need Champions League football, but they're not. It's a great squad, I agree, if they keep it together. But they're not breaking into that top four: Liverpool, Arsenal, Manchester City, or Chelsea. So are we looking at win the Europa League, Unai, do it again as a way of into the Champions League? What do we think? Because I'm looking at them thinking 6. We're talking about Manchester United, maybe Tottenham under Thomas Frank getting back in that conversation. Newcastle might be there, depending on whether they can keep hold of Alexander Isak. It's going to be tough to get into that top 6, top 8 places. Are they better off, taking 7th and winning the Europa League, guys? How do they get Champions League football?
I don't think we can just write them off because there's not been anything. There's not been a massive decline in them.
I'm not writing them off. I'm just saying I don't think they can get. I don't see them getting top 4. So how do they get Champions League football?
They finished 3 points behind Chelsea. And we went into the final day not knowing what that makeup was going to be. It was on such fine margins, and that was after making it to the Champions League quarter-final, bloody in the noses of the eventual winners, PSG. I do think we do need to pan out and think this club under Emery has taken enormous strides, and they're battling to stay in those in the mix for competing with the top 4, actually, not just the top 6, with the top 4, and they're doing it.
Can they finish in the top 4 then?
I think they need to improve. See why not?
I think they need to improve to do that, because if you, for the same reason I've just said, you look at the top 4 and how much money they've spent. Both Newcastle and Villa have had sort of more challenging sort of under the radar summers so far. There's still time to go, but you look around. This is the thing. That's what makes it so hard. The kind of established elite always go again. They've got bigger resources, and that's why it's so hard to keep up with them or break in and stay there.
3 preview shows done, and the season is already set up to be a very enticing and exciting and unpredictable one. We hope you're enjoying these pre-season preview shows. Do get in touch with me, tom.clarke@thetimes.co.uk, with any questions or queries. Guys, we'll leave it there for now. Charlotte Duncker and Gregor Robertson, thank you very much for joining me. As I say, we've got part 4, the final show, to come early next week, as Gregor Robertson and Martin Hardy chat about Sunderland, Newcastle, Leeds and Burnley. We'll see you then.
The future is unpredictable at times, but the Open University are the experts in distance learning, allowing you to fit study around your life. What's more, you'll have support from dedicated tutors every step of the way. Now, suddenly your possibilities are open. Register by the 5th of September to get started. The Open University. The future is open.